I actually got the idea for this, somewhat intellectual book when I was watching The Real Housewives of Orange County with my wife in bed. And it's a strange thing to watch television, bad television, as a media theorist, right? Because I look at it all from the standpoint of communications. So Real Housewife of Orange County was fascinating to me because I wanted to really fully understand why are there so many communication breakdowns between these women, right? They speak the same language, they have the same socioeconomic background, right? There's not that much noise in the rooms where they're speaking, they're going to meal. Why do they keep having communications breakdowns? So I really analyzed it, I looked at it. And I came to the conclusion that the problem was these women have so much Botox, right? So much plastic surgery that they're unable to execute the facial expressions that coordinate with the words that are coming out of their mouth. Right? So that in trying to lock down time at age 29, right, they've made themselves unavailable to the real moment that they're in. Right, so that the 94% of human communication that happens non-verbally is inaccessible to them. Right, one of them says, oh, my daughter's going in for a cancer test, and the other one goes, I'm so sorry to hear that. And this first one's like, wait a minute, I don't believe her. She doesn't really care about my daughter, right? And even if she does, she can't say it. So she's lost the moment. Right? And that really is the conflict that a lot of the speakers today have been talking about. What it really boils down to is this kind of conflict between Kronos, which is time of the clock, and Chyros, which is timing. Right? When you get these two things confused, when you pull yourself so far out of Chyros that you're stuck in Kronos, you end up in what I'm calling present shock. That's what the Botox women have, is present shock. Right? They're disoriented and confused. They don't know what's happened because they've tried to take one kind of time and live with that, lock in that moment in the calendar, and then they lose all this other. Right? Kronos means time of the clock. Right? It's the great Greek word for time of the clock. Like, it is 4:01. I crashed the car at 4:01 p.m. Chyros is timing. Chyros is more the question of, what time are you going to tell Dad you crashed the car? 5:01? Doesn't make sense. No. What time you're going to tell Dad you crashed the car is after he's had his drink and before he's opened the bills. Right? Timing. Timing. It's a different kind of time. Right? When we got digital technology, I was convinced, at least early on, in the late 80s, very early 90s, I was convinced, yay, we're going to get our time back. Right? These are asynchronous devices. They live outside time. So we are going to be able to schedule everything differently. Right? This was the era of, I don't know if you guys were around, the era of Slack. You remember Slackers? The whole idea was to increase Slack. Increasing Slack meant we were going to work at home in our underwear, in our own time, selling directly to other people, kind of Etsy style, in some great new peer-to-peer Burning Man rave-like universe. Right? But, and not to blame anyone in specific, or maybe the early editors of Wired magazine can be blamed, we recast this digital renaissance, this ability to really program our lives to get Slack. We recast this as a new opportunity to somehow pump more steroidal life into the NASDAQ Stock Exchange. Right? So instead of having the opportunity to extract ourselves from the industrial age, time is money, work for hire by the hour paradigm, we looked for ways to extend that obsolete agenda into the digital age, to program that into our devices and our interfaces. So instead of having more time, right, instead of having the well, which was a bulletin board where you basically had all the time in the world to respond. It was an asynchronous conversation. You would download the conversation, you would read it overnight, you would decide how you were going to respond. You'd spend like hours on your paragraph response. You'd upload it to the internet and wait to see how you sounded smarter online than you did in real life. Imagine that. It was like chess by mail because you were taking advantage of the asynchronous bias of digital technology. Right, but instead of doing that, what did we do? We turned these technologies into always-on value and time extractive technologies. Right? We were told we're living in an attention economy, and although web resources are infinite, there's only so many human eyeball hours in a day. That was an actual metric that was used. Eyeball hours, they were called, which is how much attention can people spend on your website. And we'd make websites and apps stickier so people would spend more time. And we've ended up in a digital universe where we keep devices strapped to ourselves, vibrating to us whenever someone tweets about us, or Facebook updates, or an email, or an SMS, as if we should care. I mean, it used to be the only time you would ever be interrupted, you would actually get a message coming in, was that grandma's dying or something, and the operator cuts into the phone call. Right now you get 3 call waitings every phone call that you have. And you can say, well, digital technology gives me choice. I have the choice not to respond to those. Sure, you have the choice not to respond to those, but now you've had to make 3 choices during this phone call instead of getting to actually be in that phone call. Right, so we create a world of interruptions, a world of updates that puts us in the neurological state that used to be understood or experienced only by air traffic controllers or 911 operators. Right? Or, you know, I used to work in a newsroom when I was in college, and after 2 hours, where you have to respond to the AP bell on the, anyone remember those things? There was an old Daisy, they used to have daisy wheel printers, and it would ding once for a little story and twice for a big one, like 4 if somebody's assassinated, and you run, and you check, and you go. Now we're doing that all the time. Right? Which has put us, again, in what I'm calling present shock. Right, which is this state of, well, there's kind of 5 subsets of present shock. And one of them I call narrative collapse, which is the inability to really comprehend a narrative story when you don't have time to do it. Another one is overwinding. It's kind of that thing that the Housewives did. It's what we do on the stock exchange. Overwinding, when we try to take long time periods and squish them into really small ones. You know, it's what happened on like the IPO of Facebook, when people buy it at 9 in the morning and then they're pissed off that it hasn't gone up by 9:05. Like, wait, sell! You know, they're not trying to make money on an investment, they're trying to make money on the trade in the moment. Right? And if you really want to make money on the trade in the moment, you don't buy a stock, you buy a derivative, which is what? That stock in the future. I'm going to buy Facebook 30 days from now. Or you buy a derivative of that derivative. I'm going to buy Facebook 30 days from now. I'm going to buy the sloping, the acceleration of change between here and that. Or the derivative of the derivative of the derivative. Right? And derivatives compress so much more time. Derivatives are so much more valuable in a present shock culture than real investments. Derivative exchange, the derivatives market is 300 times bigger than the real stock exchange. So much so that last month, and I'm sure you guys all know this, the derivatives exchange bought the New York Stock Exchange. Right, so the New York Stock Exchange was purchased by its own abstraction. And the New York Stock Exchange was already an abstraction of commerce, which was already an abstraction of culture. Right, so what's happening is we're creating new and greater and better and more abstract abstractions in order to squish more time into this teeny little thing. Because what are we really doing? What's the real story here? Is we're trying to extend the obsolete agendas of the industrial age into the digital age. Now, someone earlier today said that time creates media. It's the other way around. Media creates time. Right? The invention of writing created history, created the Judeo-Christian lineage, it created the Messiah, it created the contract. Writing let you say now what you intended to happen in the future. Writing let you say now what happened in the past. Right? In the mechanical age, the industrial age, we got the clock. What did the clock do? It broke up the day. You could put it up on the tower in the middle of your town, and now all of a sudden, instead of having people work to create products that they're going to sell the thing they made, they're going to sell the value they created, now people sold their time. Right? That's how we got the industrial age, is people selling their time. And at the same time, what did we do? We invented a new kind of money that had a clock built into it. Instead of people using real-time peer-to-peer currencies, which we don't have time to go into, but they were real and plentiful and all over the place and working well and letting the middle class rise and the merchants and all that. Instead of letting people do a steady-state economic sort of peer-to-peer Burning Man Etsy thing, which they were doing in the late Middle Ages, right, the waning aristocracy said, no, we're going to use central currency. They made all those local currencies illegal, and they created currency that is what? Lent into existence. You lend it into existence at interest. It has to be paid back with interest in time. So what did that set in motion? It set in motion an economy that has to grow, right? If 100,000 is lent into existence, 200,000 has to be paid back. Where does the other $100,000 come from? Because we're going to go take over India or America or South America or Africa, right? We're going to expand, we're going to extend. And this worked really well for an expansionist, goal-oriented, ends justify the means, eyes on the prize society, a narrative society with a beginning, a middle, and a justifiable end. Right? But we ended up reaching the limits of colonialization, right? The limits of our territory. When we reached the limits of territory after World War II, what did we do? We kind of did colonialism by virtual means, through the IMF and the World Bank. We're going to lend money and do all that and create a sort of a new surface area on interest, and then they all got kind of pissed off. Right? Well, we're going to open our markets to you, and then you're going to pollute our soil, and then we don't like these rules. We got to pay back all this money. This didn't really work. Where did our subsistence farming go? Right? That didn't work. But then the net came along. And all of a sudden, we had a new kind of territory. It wasn't going to be a territory of space. It was going to be a territory of human time. Human time is where we're trying to expand our markets. But it's all because we're actually basing our entire model of society and economics on an obsolete 13th century printing press economic operating system. You know, Google and Facebook and Twitter, God bless them, they disintermediate everything we know of, but they're still sitting on top of a platform that they don't question. They're still sitting on top of venture capital and shareholders. It's like, you're so revolutionary? Yeah, I'm going to get to my Series B soon. Where I come from, people who are moving towards Series B are not revolutionary, right? They're reactionary. They're conformist. If you really want to play the game, let's play the game. Let's look at the underlying operating system and subvert that. And to do that, I think what we have to do is reclaim time. Reclaim time in all the ways we're talking about. Reclaim time in terms of your life and how you use these devices and how you promote them. But as businesses, as entrepreneurs, as creatives, it's a matter of inventing. It's a matter of inventing new models of time. Right? Whether that's as simple as kind of post-narrative dramatic production, which we're seeing from The Simpsons and Beavis and Butthead, right through Game of Thrones, right through video games that are real-time choice-making, never-ending, open-ended stories, you know, to sustainable agriculture. You know, once we move off the industrial age clock, once we move out of a world with beginnings, middles, and ends, once we no longer need a zombie apocalypse to justify where we are today, once we no longer need a singularity in order to have a false narrative about why it's okay to let computing just take us over, I mean, how human self-loathing is that? Don't worry, information is just evolving towards greater states of complexity, and human beings are just one stage in that journey. You know, I don't buy that. I'm on Team Human here. You know, call that egotistical, but it's the only team I know. And I don't believe that the computers really have a team. They don't. They are just corporate tools, right? And corporations are just a program. Right, so the beauty of moving into a post-narrative age is, yes, we lose certain goals, we lose certain ways of transmitting values. Right, but what we get is a new kind of game. We get to play a game where the object is no longer to win, but to keep the game going. And that's how you get sustainable models of society. That's how you start looking at the human race, looking at the planet, looking at our society, looking at civilization, looking at our economy as a steady state that we want to continue, rather than as this thing that is required to grow because of an obsolete operating system, because of an obsolete notion of time, because of an addiction to Kronos and an inability to touch Chyros. Okay, thank you very much. Read my book. Okay.